Nancy's going to move on to her next presentation, the finances.
Okay, so I'll switch modes now. I'll put my treasurer's hat back on. I'm happy to be able to present the ARIN Treasurer's Report virtually, and I'm pretty sure that this is the reason you've all stayed on the webinar for as long as you have. I've been helped enormously by ARIN staff and my colleagues on the Board of Trustees in my role as treasurer, and I really want to take this opportunity to thank the Financial Services Department for their continued dedication to evolving financial reporting and metrics that the board relies on so heavily. This presentation that you will see is an example of that dedication. We have a new CFO at ARIN, Brian Kirk, and he and the rest of the Financial Services Department are responsible for several commendable initiatives this year. I'm going to update you on the Finance Committee and some changes in its scope since we last met, after which I'm going to review the 2019 financial results. I'll present the 2020 Q1 results. I'll provide highlights of our investment portfolio, including late-breaking news, and then finally look at customer growth. The Finance Committee has been busy since we met in October. ARIN staff worked diligently last fall in collaboration with the Finance Committee to develop the 2020-2021 budget, which was then approved by the board. In January, we merged the Finance Committee and the Audit Committee into one committee. This means that the Finance Committee now oversees the financial audit and maintains a relationship with the audit firm, in addition to the other responsibilities that we had. The Finance Committee reviewed the financial statements for 2019 and recommended board approval. Over the last few months, we've been monitoring revenues to ensure that there's no negative impacts on cash flow as a result of the pandemic. And finally, we continue to monitor the investment portfolio for compliance with the investment policy statement and make adjustments required in consultation with our investment consultants. And we're currently in the midst of an update to the investment policy statement. ARIN has an annual financial audit performed by an independent outside firm to fulfill the board's fiduciary responsibility to our community. The 2019 financial statements are now available on the ARIN website. Please have a look. I'm delighted to report that we had a clean audit with no recommendations to management. This is always a good thing. The audited financial statements include an accounting standard change in the way that the organization recognizes revenues. ARIN is now ASC 606 compliant, which is exciting accounting speak. And thanks to the significant efforts of the finance team, which the auditor acknowledged specifically in their report to the Finance Committee. The 2019 financial results are in front of you. Registration revenue came in slightly under budget, and our operating expenses were approximately 5% under budget. The operating loss was half of what we had budgeted for 2019 and half of what we experienced in 2018. Our investment income was significantly higher than budgeted, and the investment income of $4.2 million helped to absorb the impact of the 2019 adjustment on the financial results. This is a timing adjustment only and affects when revenues are recognized. So rather than a budgeted $800,000 decrease in net assets for 2019, net assets actually increased by $1.4 million, a significant increase from the 2018 result. Details of our revenues for 2019 show a 3% increase over 2018. The increase is a direct result of the fee increase that was implemented in July last year. The accounting adjustment in 2019 meant that our registration maintenance fees are slightly under the budgeted $18.6 million. In response to a comment at ARIN 44, we have refrained from eye charts in the treasurer's presentation this time. So operating expenses in 2019 were 3% less than 2018. This is explained by changes in a number of our expense categories. A staff reduction at the end of 2018, accounted for a 6% reduction in salary and benefits costs. Travel costs were reduced as a result of conscious efforts to manage travel budgets. Legal fees were also lower in 2019. Increases in consulting, professional fees, outreach, and public relations offset some of those reductions. Operating expenses in 2019 were 5% less than budgeted. In October, I told you that we were 5% underspent on our operating expenses, and we expected that trend to continue to the end of the year, and it did. The biggest factors in the actual versus budget variances are quite similar to our year-over-year variances. A number of fringe benefits were underutilized in the year. Travel was reduced and managed conservatively. Consulting and professional fees were impacted, as were outreach and public relations. The net asset balance increased by approximately 1.4 million at the end of 2019, as I mentioned earlier, resulting $28.8 million in net assets is a significant component of ARIN's statement of financial position or balance sheet presentation. Net assets as a percentage of expenses is a new metric that we presented at ARIN 44, and it's a metric that can be used to demonstrate the financial health of a not-for-profit organization. At the end of 2019, ARIN's net assets were sufficient to cover 16 months of operating expenses. This is an increase over 2018 and is positive. Finally, the 2020 Q1 results. Revenues are 5% under budget and not really achieving the budgeted growth as at March 31st. Fortunately, however, we have not experienced any material negative effect on revenues and cash flow because of COVID-19, and this is something that the Finance Committee and the Financial Services Department is monitoring closely. Operating expenses are 3% under budget, due mostly to reduced travel and meeting costs. We experienced investment losses due to the COVID-19 impact on financial markets, and at March 31st, that investment loss was just over $4 million due to the market corrections in both the US and Canada. ARIN's investment portfolio is allocated into 3 distinct funds, each with different investment objectives. The chart in front of you illustrates the investment portfolio balances over the past 17 months. The operating reserve and the legal reserve have not experienced any material changes. The long-term reserve, thank you. The long-term reserve is where all the volatility has happened. You will note that we have subsequently experienced recovery to the March market corrections. At the end of May, the long-term reserve fund had recovered significantly, bringing total investments to $28.6 million. Today, the portfolio balance is $29.2 million, bringing us within 3% of the December 31st balance. As the CFO noted this morning, this is almost a full recovery. The Finance Committee and ARIN staff continue to work very closely with ARIN's investment consultants to manage these investments. On this last slide, you see customer growth since 2016. Over the past 4.5 years, you can see that the material growth continues to be in the small categories. The overall customer growth is 15% since 2016. That brings me to the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Nancy, for that presentation. Being the second treasurer to have to report through one of those big U's in the finance, Scott Bradner, I think, being the last. Are there any questions for Nancy on this presentation?